Brent, you learned something during that deal, didn't you? Yeah. It's my pleasure to have Brent Kisling here. He's the Executive Director of Commerce for the state of Oklahoma. He was previously here September 5th of 2019 and actually agreed to come back again. So Brent, come on up. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. Really appreciate that. This is my favorite club to come to. I would come back every week. You guys are incredible. I've never been to, Chris, I get to go to a lot of different civic clubs around the state. You're the only one I've ever seen that does the Happy Bucks thing. Maybe that's a Stillwater thing. Most of the civic clubs, it's just people talking about who just died or their bunion on their foot or something like. It's all negative, negative stuff. So man, I love that. I love the optimism, and I would consider optimism kind of a Stillwater thing. You guys have really got it going on here in this community. You've got a great team put together. I enjoy working with your senator down in Oklahoma City. We've just finished up a great legislative session. I'm going to touch on a couple things on there. And really, I'm going to cover three things with you. And electric vehicles will be an important part of that, but I want to lead up to it with a little bit of background as well. I want to talk a little bit about where our economy is right now, some of the new legislation that passed this year that relate to electric vehicles and some of these new diversified industries coming to the state. And then we'll specifically talk about electric vehicles, and I might talk a little bit about film too, if we have the time, and would love to answer any questions that you guys have. Anytime I can come back to Stillwater, I try to do it. I am actually your 1994 homecoming king here from yes. I still wear the sash and the crown around the house from time to time, and I'm as soon as I'm done here, this is one of the beauties of the job. I love road trips anyway, but I'm actually driving to Durant after this. Are you from Durant, or you just love Southeast Oklahoma? Okay. Well, it is a growing community too, similar to Stillwater, but North Texas is kind of moving up that direction. But we host an event every year in Durant that's called our Golf and Striper event, and we bring in CEOs and site selectors from all over the world, but it's they are all golfing today, and then they're striper fishing tomorrow. But we actually had a typo on the invite this year on the word striper, and we have record attendances. I'm not even kidding. It is huge. I'm kidding about the attendance. I am not kidding about the typo. It was very true. But no, I'm looking forward to going down there and seeing everybody. But the theme for today is now is the time in Oklahoma. As your head of the Department of Commerce and the person that has my economics degree from College of Ag here at Oklahoma State University and analyzing the economy every single day, our numbers, it would be very difficult for our economic numbers to look better than they do right now. And I don't need to tell you, these last 12, 14 months have been absolutely amazing to look at for economists and people who love to look at that kind of thing, seeing the way one political decision would impact the numbers and the economy on average wages and on unemployment and tax revenues that come into our taxing entities. But we just came out of a legislative session with a $1.6 billion surplus that the legislature got to spend. And I think about half of that, the senator made sure came to Stillwater. That didn't happen back in the Halligan days, right? I mean, we didn't have a lot of those big $1.6 billion surpluses. That wasn't your fault. It was just a different time, completely different time. But we've come back roaring. Our unemployment rate right now is 4.2%. Nationally, it's 6%. So we're almost a full 2 percentage points better than the rest of the United States. We're 12th right now in the nation in unemployment rate. So we are doing a better job as a state. We being our businesses, those that are employing our citizens, are doing a much better job of keeping our citizens employed than most of the other states around the United States. We're at 97% of pre-COVID GDP. Those numbers come out every quarter. And we're expecting the new numbers to come out this week. And I assume that they'll be well over 100% at that point. And then one number that I love to track, and many of you are probably involved in retail in some way, but in February of 2021, our total retail sales in the state of Oklahoma was 9.7%, almost 10% higher than they were in February 2020. Now, the reason why that's important is because February 2020 was the month before Rudy Gobert tested positive at the Jazz Thunder game and the world started shutting down. 9.7% higher, almost 10% higher in total retail sales. And I love to track retail sales because I think it's more of a leading indicator in an economy than some of the unemployment rates and GDP numbers and some of that, because it tells me that people have money in their pocket and that they have confidence in the economy enough to spend those dollars. But those of you in here that are involved with retail also know something else about those numbers. You know that the reason they are higher is because our online sales have gone up almost 25% year over year, whereas your sales to the mom and pop operation on Main Street is down about 7% year over year. So our purchasing has changed as a state. I would suggest it probably has as an entire nation. It may continue to come back somewhat, but I think that's one of our headwinds in our economy right now. That and oil and gas has been another area that's been a headwind for us. We're getting close to $70 on West Texas Intermediate again, which I think is going to make the Commerce Director look a lot smarter because we're going to see a lot more capital flowing into that industry. But all in all, our numbers are looking pretty strong as a state. And we've got some great tools that came out of the legislature this year. And I wanted to mention just a couple of things because I want you as a community to be thinking, how can we start taking advantage of some of the new programs that are out there and whatever industry you're in, making sure that this fits with you as well. But some of the big things that happened, the legislature put $20 million into the Governor's Quick Action Closing Fund. You actually have a couple of the biggest projects that we are working on in the state are looking at Stillwater right now. And these would be not expansions, these would be new businesses coming to the state. And we have lots of great incentive programs. The Governor's Quick Action Closing Fund is what I can take to the boardroom table whenever we're tied with Austin, Texas, or New Orleans or something for a location of a business. And I can put an extra 500,000 on the table or another $1 million on the table in order to develop some kind of infrastructure to get them across the finish line to move here and employ our citizens. So 20 million into that is absolutely huge. There's also 15 million for a new accelerator program that we'll be kicking off here in the next couple of months. Our REAP program has record numbers in it. That's the Rural Economic Action Program, basically funds rural infrastructure. 15 million in there. But the Department of Commerce, we administer 44 different business incentive programs. And I've worked in economic development since probably 20, 25 years. And there were some that we administered that I had never even heard of before. And so we went through an effort this year to try to streamline all of our incentive programs, to eliminate a bunch of them that weren't working, combine several of them, modernize. Some of them hadn't been touched or changed since the 1980s. And so we had 29 request bills this year. That is the most bills that the Department of Commerce has ever requested to the legislature, cumulative in the history of our agency. Normally we might have one or two, but 29 request bills this year, and 24 of those passed and were signed into law by the governor. So we have a brand new set of programs that we can utilize in order to assist businesses to grow here in the state. And I want to touch on just a couple of these because I think they're going to be very important to Stillwater. First of all is the Quality Events Program. You're chair of the Tourism Committee. We've had a incentive program for years in Oklahoma to help you incentivize some big tournament to come to Karsten Creek or some big something or other with Oklahoma State University. We've had an incentive program in place, but it's terrible. It's been an absolutely terrible program. It hadn't even been accessed in the last 5 years. I think there's been 4 or 5 projects total that I've ever accessed it, because it's arduous. It was very difficult. You had to actually hire an accountant to go in and keep track of receipts and that kind of thing. Legislature completely changed the program this year, has made it much easier. It won't be active till November 1st with the new rules. But you might think of that as you're looking to recruit things here to the state. We now have a useful, I believe, a very useful quality events program. We also passed a new Filmed in Oklahoma program. The film industry is huge in our state right now. We were the only state out of all 50 states that declared the film industry an essential service during our time. We had 34 different major productions that were filmed in Oklahoma between April 1st and the end of the calendar year 2020. 34 that were here. That didn't even include Killers of the Flower Moon, which I went to that set last week. That is the largest. It's up in Pawhuska right now. That is the largest set in the history of United States cinema. It's happening in Pawhuska right now. It will be the largest budget film in America in 2021. They have 7,000 extras that are part of this film. If you get a chance to drive up there, it's like stepping back into 1921. All the cars in town are 1921. It's amazing. Look it up. If you've not read the book, you should, because whenever I read it, I felt stupid that I didn't know all of that had happened in Osage County. But we passed a new film incentive this year. Historically, we'd put about $8 million a year toward film. This new program has a cap of $30 million. But also before, whenever you spend $1 in filming, you got a 37% rebate. We cut that back to 20%. So we can spread the dollars over a lot more films and really try to push people toward production facilities, sound stages, editing stages. You have requirements. You have to actually hire our folks in order to film here. Again, I think it's revolutionary. There's really 3 states besides us that are in the film industry. California, obviously, and then New Mexico and Georgia. We expect to overtake Georgia quickly, and really hope to catapult by New Mexico as well. There's a new rural broadband program. That's probably one of the first things we noticed out of the pandemic, is that people did not have connectivity. And we would love to try to get to where every Oklahoman had 100 megabytes upload, 100 download for $100 a month. If we could ever get to a point like that, that's a game changer for the state of Oklahoma. We can get to the 100 up and the 100 down. It's the $100 a month is where it gets kind of gets tough. But a new broadband program. We have a new remote worker program. We were just talking about it at this table. There are people sitting in Dallas right now paying $3,000 a square foot for an apartment and being told they will never go back to their office. They will telework from now on. Why are they doing that? Why wouldn't they move to Ardmore? Why wouldn't they move to Oklahoma City? Why wouldn't they move to Stillwater? We now have a local remote worker incentive program. And then we have 2 programs that deal with entrepreneurship, which fits very well with Stillwater. First one's called the Back of Business program, which again, this will also fit with electric vehicles. But right now in Oklahoma, if you invest, Steve, you invest $200,000 in an oil well, you would be able to deduct that $200,000 from your taxes. It's not a tax credit; it's a tax deduction. You can deduct it from your taxes. We're wanting to duplicate that in the entrepreneurship space. So if somebody is starting a new business, you can invest in that business and deduct that from your taxes. That passed into law this year. We're working on the rules right now. And then the other one that passed is a Invest in Oklahoma program. Randy McDaniel, our state treasurer, great partner for us at Commerce. He manages a portfolio of billions of dollars, retirement funds, TSET dollars, and all these different funds. They're invested in funds all around the world, businesses all around the world. The Invest in Oklahoma program takes a small sliver of a little bit of his investment portfolio and says that those dollars need to be invested in Oklahoma funds, which then would invest in Oklahoma businesses. So it was historic. It was absolutely a historic year for economic development and commerce in the legislature. And so Senator, appreciate it. I know Trish and John also here just do a fantastic job representing you down there. But here's the question of today then. So how do we take all of this history, this great catapult, that's the word I'm using right now, catapulting, coming out of the pandemic, leading the charge among at least the sophisticated states. There are some states that have some numbers better than us, but they're like Montana and Wyoming. We don't care about them. We're among the sophisticated states. Everybody here's from Wyoming and Montana. No, that's every time I say that, I find somebody's going to come up to me and say, oh, my grandma's from there. But among the sophisticated states, we really are leading the way on the economy coming back. But we are still a commodity-based economy in Oklahoma. I'm farm kid from northern Alfalfa County. We're getting ready to start cutting wheat tomorrow, probably up there. Been already gone through our first cut in the hay. I mean, farming's our life, but there are too many of our commodities that we grow and or we mine and we put on a barge and send somewhere else. We load on a truck and and send it elsewhere to have value added to it. And so those commodity prices, which are based on world conditions, affect our economy a lot here in the great state of Oklahoma. So that's why we talk quite a bit about diversifying. How do we bring other things in here to even out the economic situation, keep our citizens employed and keep our average wages up as high as we can? And there's three in particular that we're looking at. I'm going to touch briefly on the first two, and then we'll talk about automotive. But value-added agriculture is an important one for us in Oklahoma. We are actually hiring a full-time ag recruiter at the Department of Commerce. Never had that ever before, and no, it will not be a Kisling family member, but this will be our first time to have a full-time value-added agriculture recruiter to work with our meat processing facilities, with equipment manufacturers, with animal pharmaceutical companies. There is a lot of different things that we can do in the ag space that we've just never at the Department of Commerce done well before. This is in partnership with Blaine Arthur, who is your Secretary of Agriculture in the state, another great Oklahoma State graduate. But I think there's some good things to happen there. Film, as I mentioned before, is another big one to come here. And right now we've gone from 0 to 6 new production studios just in the last 12 months. And a production studio will typically have between 200 to 300 permanent employees that are here. So they're building sets. They're the ones that are handling all the transportation. And just seeing that set last week in Pawhuska just absolutely amazed me. And I got to meet dozens and dozens of people who live here in Oklahoma that work on a set like that. And it's not all just actors and people that hold the booms with the microphones on it. There is so much more to it, to the engineering positions and accounting positions, and logistics is probably the biggest part of it. Hair and makeup stuff. Up there in Pawhuska, right in the middle of all this, there are 80 different sets in Pawhuska where they do filming. And there's a Simple Simon's pizza that sits right in the middle of it. And they purchase at a minimum 100 pizzas a day from that Simple Simon's pizza just for their extras. 100 pizzas a day from Simple Simon's Pizza. And plus they have rented out there's not many hotel rooms in Pawhuska. They've rented out every hotel room in Bartlesville for the next 5 months, every single one of them. And that's an industry that has just been hammered over the last year, basically saved that industry up there in that area. So it's a unique industry. I'm learning a little bit more about it. I don't speak all the language yet, but it is certainly on its way here. But the big one by far is the automotive industry. And our automotive industry in America started around the Great Lakes. I mean, you think Detroit, you think automobiles, even though I don't know that they make hardly any automobiles in Detroit anymore. But it started there and it migrated towards southeastern United States and the Atlanta area, Georgia, the Carolinas. You see a lot of that final assembly, and that's an important point to make. Really, it's final assembly of automobiles has happened in that area of the United States. What has happened in there now is you have a strong industry cluster, but it has also ramped up their labor costs by quite a bit. You have unions that have moved in there. You have just the fact that people can steal from each other going back and forth. And so the industry has started moving west. And probably the best example of that was whenever Tesla decided that they were going to build a new gigafactory, and they're headquartered in California, but they did not even want to look at southeastern United States. They wanted to look at this area. They had pretty much decided they were going to move to Texas. And if you follow Elon Musk on Twitter, he's the most random human being you have ever ever seen on a social media site. But he actually, I think he got torqued off at something that was going on in Texas, and he tweeted that he was opening up to look at something else, another state. Sean Copeland was our secretary at the time, and he loves to track people on Twitter. And he responded like immediately, on behalf of the state of Oklahoma, as Secretary of Commerce, we'd love to talk to you. And they started this whole conversation on Twitter, which is so different than any other project I have ever worked before. It was a very public project, but this, I mean, that could have been 10,000 employees is what that was looking to be. They were looking at Tulsa. We did some analysis. We found 1,970 articles that were written about the fact that Oklahoma was in the mix with Tesla. That was in 50 different countries, and at least 30.5 million views on the articles that we found. So 30 million people saw that Oklahoma was competing against Austin, Texas for a major 10,000 employee automobile final assembly plant here in the state. Tesla is not the only one doing electric vehicles. In fact, just about every OEM now has announced that over the next 10 to 20 years, they will be phasing out the combustible engine and heading toward something that you plug in. I have driven since I was 16 years old, actually since I was probably 12. I have had a pickup. I've always driven, Rob knows, I have always driven a pickup. Farm kid, you always drive a pickup. In this job, I put on about 5,000 miles a month, and the F-150 just wasn't economical for me to do that. And so I got a little Ford Fusion, which Ford only makes 2 sedans anymore, the Mustang and the Fusion. And it's got a big battery in the back. You don't plug it in, but you'll be driving down the road and all of a sudden the engine turns off and you're just running on electricity. And it gets about 45 miles to the gallon, which works pretty well for driving around the state of Oklahoma. That industry is changing right now. As battery technology continues to improve, you're going to see more and more of that type of vehicle out there. And we're already in the space. You don't think about Oklahoma as being a big automotive state, but we have a little company in Oklahoma City called Spears New Technology. Have any of you heard of Spears New Technology? S-P-I-E-R-S. They are a Dutch company located here about 5 years ago as a startup company. As of today, they are the largest rehabilitation company in the world for auto batteries, not the little battery that helps you start your engine. The big batteries that either go on the bottom of the car or in the trunk. They are the largest in the world. So whenever my battery in the back of my Ford Fusion goes bad, Ford's not the one that fixes that. They don't rehab it or even recycle it. They send it to Spears New Technology. And so all around the world, those come here to Oklahoma City. So that we've already have that relationship that's going on just through Dirk Spears. We also have Navistar in Tulsa. They make buses. One of the largest bus manufacturing locations in the world is right at Tulsa International Airport, right next to American Airlines and Spears New Technology. And they are in the process of transforming their fleet from combustible engines over to electric vehicles as well. And then there's others like Hennings Auto down in Frederick. They make almost, well, not all, they make a large percentage of the little black rubber gasket that goes around your door and that keeps things from rattling. They make those in Frederick, Oklahoma. They send them all around the world from there. And then Sport Chassis over in Clinton. You have Newell Coach in Miami. These are very premier, nice vehicles that are made. But then the 2 big ones that we don't think about all the time is Michelin and Goodyear. We make Michelin tires. One of the largest production facilities for Michelin is in Ardmore. And then Goodyear, which is in Lawton, it's one of Goodyear's largest production facilities. Every tire that goes on a Tesla in their production is made at the Goodyear plant in Lawton. And you may not know this, but the tires on electric vehicles are different than the tires that go on combustible engine. I did not know this until I went down there, but whenever they make one of the tires for a Tesla, if any of you own a Tesla or have a friend that they will tell you about this, there's about 1.5 inch foam that goes on the inside of the tire. And it just looks like regular foam, but they glue it on the inside of the tire to reduce the noise of that tire from inside the cabin. Because whenever you drive your combustible engine vehicle, you get that engine sound. And so you're really not hearing the tires on the ground. When you don't have that sound of the engine going, I can tell you just from my Fusion, whenever the car turns off, it's much louder than what you would think. So they have to have special tires that go on. All of those special tires, at least on the OEM side, are made down there in Lawton. So there's a lot of those relationships that are already in place. We passed a piece of legislation this year called DRIVE, and I don't remember what it stands for, but it is a new way to tax electric vehicles in the state. Right now, in order to pay for roads and bridges and all of that, we pay for that through your gas tax. Whenever you go fill up with Jim Griffith, you are on cue. You are going to pay a gas tax, pretty substantial one, that's going to go to pay for roads and bridges and all that kind of thing. Well, electric vehicles don't fill up with gas, and so we had to come up with a way. And I think what the legislature did this year is the most innovative way in the nation to do it. Being able to charge at charging stations, being able to pay a fee every year in order to offset some of that cost. We had a study come out just a month ago that says Oklahoma today is the #1 EV friendly state in the nation, better than California by a long ways. We are #1. And it's because of the taxing structure that we put in place to prepare for these vehicles long term. And the fact that we are the only state in the United States where you cannot drive more than 50 miles without passing a charging station. We're the only state that has that. As a company out of California that put all those, or out of Tulsa, that put all those charging stations in for us. And it's privately funded, but a great network from all across the state. And the other thing that's interesting about the industry, and then I'll close and start opening up for questions, is that whenever something like this happens in any industry, whatever it might be, new players can jump in. It's been very difficult for the last several decades for somebody to jump in and just start making cars and compete with Ford and Chevy and Dodge and all of them. But whenever there's a new disruptive technology, such as batteries, that come along, it opens it up for new investment and new folks to get in on the ground floor. And we're working very closely as a state with the big OEMs. Every name that you have ever heard, we have had conversations with them, and all of them have projects right now because it's going to take new production facilities for them to make these electric vehicles. But we're also trying to focus on that next layer down too. You know, there's one company that in particular, Rivian, that you probably have never heard of before, but they are headquartered out of the Chicago area, brand new startup company. All they make is electric vehicles. They just won the contract with Amazon for all of Amazon's delivery vehicles. So every new vehicle that Amazon purchases in order to deliver your products to your house, those are going to be electric vehicles, and they're going to be Rivian. They're not Ford vehicles. They're not Chevy vehicles. They're not Dodge. They are Rivian. And the very first place where they are implementing this new purchase agreement is at the Tulsa Amazon distribution fulfillment center that they have out there. So we have all these relationships right now, and that's why I said at the very beginning, I think the time is now for the state of Oklahoma. I think you're going to see some amazing announcements here over the next several months as some of these companies start to look at our state and see some of this success that we've had, especially over the last couple of months. They want to be a part of it. I tell the governor all the time that there's two things that really drive an economy. If you can be consistent and if you can have optimism, that really helps you to drive an economy, because businesses love to have some consistency. You don't want your laws changing every week. You don't want people telling you one thing and then something different happen. You want some consistency, and you want to be part of something optimistic. That's where you want to invest your dollars. So that's what we're up to. Department of Commerce. I don't know if I'm out of time or not. Hopefully not. Got 2 minutes. But
this last part of your speech goes over petroleum.
well, that's actually a great question, because you use hydrocarbons to make electricity too. And a lot of the industry is starting to recognize that. It's not so much about driving, using the pun, but driving the industry toward electric vehicles. It's more about recognizing that the electric vehicles are coming and making sure that we're positioned for them. And I think the more innovative companies are the ones that are really jumping in that. Yes, sir.
So this is the first state of the economy address I've heard in 5 or 6 years. Not mention aerospace.
Mm-hmm.
So would you mention it? And
But yes.
tell us what's going on there.
Yep.
I'm assuming the picture right now is not quite so rosy.
It is. And I had it written down here, and I didn't, because I could tell that y'all were glazing over a little bit. So I didn't talk about it much. But one thing that we've done different in Oklahoma in the last 2 years is changed our strategy for recruitment to be more industry specific. At the Department of Commerce, we used to have a global division. So every month they were in a different country. They were in Brazil or in Europe, or Germany, whatever, recruiting companies to come. And then we'd have a national division that would go to Atlanta and Houston and Chicago. And then we would have some that work with existing businesses here. And I've never felt like that's a great strategy. I think you need people who are industry specific, somebody that just works medical devices. And that way, if it's a company that's growing or somebody that wants to move here, they can speak the language, they can know the trade organizations. And so we've completely changed that. And we followed the example of aerospace, because that is the one area in Oklahoma where we became very focused. The legislature puts $1 million a year into a program called ACES that we use to hire 3 people and pay for the ability to travel the world and work with companies. And over the last 10 years, since that's been in place, we went from having a good aerospace industry to now it being our 2nd largest employer in the state. So it has worked, and that's what we're trying to duplicate with value-added ag, automotive, and some of these others. Yes, sir.
We're about out of time, but some of the state finance, different than national finance and local finance initiative, how do you measure the return?
The return on incentives. Oh, that's at the core of what I try to do every single day. We have a research division at the Department of Commerce, and every dollar that we spend has to have an ROI, and it has to be performance-based, and it has to be, if we're going to write you a check, you've got to write us a bigger one back. We call it a net benefit positive to the state, and we are required by law every one of our incentives to have that in place. So we do that analysis up front. And we may make a promise to somebody that we're going to incentivize you for $1.5 million to come here, but we're not going to write you a check for $1.5 million. You're going to have to hire 50 employees in the first 6 months, and it has to have an average wage of $56,000. Oh, and you have to have invested $5 million in your facility, and you've got to show us the receipts on them. So there, yeah, I've got a whole division. That's all they do is shoot me those reports and say, yes, Mr. Kisling, we're net benefit positive to the state. And that's a huge, not everybody understands that. So I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, sir. Last question.
How many sound stations are there now in Oklahoma? What's the basic investment?
Yep. The second part of that question would be very difficult to answer, because you could do a sound stage in here. There's 6 official ones right now. And we, the Department of Commerce, we actually certify those sound stages. And some of them are very small. There's a school in Luther, Oklahoma, that a group came in and purchased, and they converted the gymnasium and the classrooms and everything over to a sound stage and production studio. You've got an editing shop in Edmond that now is doing editing on a lot of these different films that are coming in. There's also a sound studio where even like Carrie Underwood has recorded some songs in there. And then you have Prairie Surf Studios, which is the second largest production studio in North America. They leased the old Cox Convention Center in downtown Oklahoma City. And so if you've ever been in there in that big arena, that is now a soundstage. And so you can build some huge sets in there. And then all those different rooms that they have around, those have all been soundproofed now. And they're hoping to bring in, I love bringing in something big that's going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars like Killers of the Flower Moon. But what I would really love to have is a Netflix series or an Apple TV series, something that's going to film for the next 5 years and continue to invest. That's how you build up an infrastructure and a workforce. So that's where I'm heading. In closing, let me say this. I got into economic development because my wife and I used to own a bed and breakfast in Enid. And we started with one house, one room, grew it to one of the largest in the state. But there was one time when we were trying to expand where we bought a house that was just down the street from one of our other houses. And it wasn't zoned commercial, it was zoned residential. So we had to go to city council and get it changed. And we invested some dollars. We went through all the process. I showed up at city council with my wonderful wife. We sit on the front row. It's the first city council meeting I'd ever been to. And the place was packed, clear full of people. And I thought, oh my goodness, everybody's so excited about city council here. I didn't realize we were such an engaged community. And we're sitting on the front row and they go through all these agenda items and they get to our agenda item. And I quickly found out that everybody in that room had signed up to speak against our rezoning. There was at least 50 different people that stood up and told me things about myself that I did not know. and my business that I did not know. And we get to the end of it, not a single person spoke in favor. And I had to get up at the end and say, I'm sorry, everything they said is not true. It's not a brothel. It's not, we're not going to do some of this stuff. We're not going to have a striper fishing tournament. We're not going to do any of that here. We really want to contribute and invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in this neighborhood. And they voted us down, unanimously voted down our zoning. It was a time in my life, there was no way I could lose that much money on a deal, but we did. And we've rebounded and came back. But I was convinced after that every time I saw that there was a business on city council agenda, I was going to go and at least sign up and say, thank you. Just stand at the microphone and turn around and say, thank you for your investment in our community. And so that is one of my passions at the Department of Commerce too, is to remind our business leaders that you are welcome here, that we are thankful that you kept our people employed here over the last 12 months. You're the reason that now is the time for our state. And it's been an honor for me to be here today. Thank you.